Greetings, everyone. Welcome to a new episode. This is an attempt, at least, to respond to the crowd demands for more provisionism or open theism related content. I will hopefully try to touch on some open theism in a different episode, but to satisfy the viewers who are interested in some provisionism related topics, I thought I'd take an initial look at the new book by David L. Allen called Liberating Romans from Reformed Captivity, a critical evaluation of Calvinism's interpretation of Paul's letter. So the book is here. It has the smiling face of its author on the back, and it has remarkably, they've decided to publish a recommendation from Dr. Ken Wilson on the back cover. So that already is off on on a bad start, this particular book. And of course, unfortunately, I noticed almost immediately noticed some footnote to the same Ken Wilson. For example, at page 86, there's a footnote to Wilson, uh, and so forth. So not a great start to this particular book, but let's take a look at what we can and just get some kind of initial thoughts, initial reactions to this work. Unfortunately, normally this would be a time when Dan and I are joining one another to discuss topics, but unfortunately, Dan is unable to be with us this week. God willing, he'll be back next week. But for the moment, let's just take a look then at this book. So the book it's hefty enough. It's over 200 pages long. It is published in 2025. It is published by a little company, Legacy Inc., which I assume is some kind of, I assume it's some kind of publication service or something like that. Perhaps print on demand. I'm not sure. In any event, there's also available hardcover and ebook editions. This is the softcover edition. If any of the page numbers are different in your edition, that's presumably why, but we'll see. So the book has a number of chapters. The chapters, 10 chapters, including the conclusion, and then a postscript with personal perspective on Calvinism after 50 years, presumably the author's own 50 years. Appendix 1, a chart on Romans 9 through 11, annotated to identify pronoun antecedents. Appendix 2, semantic structure analysis of Romans 9 through 11. So although it's liberating Romans from Reformed captivity, there's some presumably analytical work there in the appendices. Now let's do I should say, there are certain aspects of this book that do seem academic. There's a bibliography, for example, and there is not only just a bibliography, but also it's organized by author name, which is helpful. It's not endnotes, which I'm very appreciative of. It has footnotes, which, again, far superior to have footnotes versus endnotes. I don't know why people continue to do endnotes, but in any event, it does have, of course, you expect in any academic publication some incestuous citations, and David Allen doesn't disappoint. He cites his own work, Does Regeneration Precede Faith? The Extent of the Atonement, a Biblical, Theological, and Historical Study of the Cross of Christ, a Critique of Limited Atonement, and To the Jew First, Two-Part Romans, a Structural Game Changer, ? Both these are things all published within the last, decade plus 1 year to get back to the fall of 2014 for the earliest one of those works. So those are the Allen self-citations. There's also a number of other citations. We'll get to some of these a little bit more in a moment. There's one thing I wanted to do is to say, look, if you're going to write something that says liberating Romans from Reformed captivity, and you're going to call it a critical evaluation of Calvinism's interpretation of Paul's letter, my initial thought on this is, well, let's see what the chapter, I guess we should see first, what are the chapter titles about? We don't want to judge this book entirely by its cover, its endorsements and so forth. So what are the chapters? Are the recipients and purpose of Romans. Seems like a reasonable place to start. Chapter 2, Romans and the theological influence of Augustine, a watershed moment. I appreciate this linking Augustine to Reformed theology, but of course they're not identical. Reformed theology is a theological development rooted in many ways in Augustine's work and many other patristic authors' works, but it's not identical with Augustine. But anyway, there is no doubt there's some Augustinian influence on Reformed theology. But chapter 3 continues the Augustinian theme with Augustine, Reformed theology, and total depravity. Chapter 4, Augustine, Reformed theology, and unconditional election. Chapter 5, Augustine, Reformed theology, and the extent of the atonement. Chapter 6, Augustine, Reformed theology, and irresistible grace. Chapter 7, Augustine, Reformed theology, and perseverance of the saints. So people who are familiar with the acronym TULIP will notice the T for total depravity, U for unconditional election. The extent of the atonement obscures this a little bit since it doesn't use the word limited there. And then irresistible grace for the I and perseverance of the saints for the P. And there you have chapters 3 through 7 laid out according to that acrostic. Then chapter 8, Augustine Pelagianism and Romans 9. And then chapter 9 is Augustine Supersessionism, in parentheses, replacement theology, and Romans 9 through 11. And then chapter 10 is the conclusions, and I've mentioned the postscript and appendices previously. So you can see there's a thematic arrangement according to the so-called 5 points of Calvinism. That's the heart of the book after this recipients and purpose section and a general introduction to the theological influence of Augustine. Then the only things after this are this connection to Pelagianism, which is an interesting place to go, and replacement theology, so-called, towards the end there. So we'll not dive yet into the substance of those chapters. This is just an initial look. It might be interesting to dig into these a bit. It is always interesting to me as someone who I enjoy doing it, but there's someone who does interact with Roman Catholic opponents all the time. They're not quite so willing as our provisionist friends to say that Reformed theology is just Augustinianism. In fact, I'm pretty confident that if I would have some of my Roman Catholic debate opponents on to discuss Reformed theology and Augustine, they would not grant that Reformed theology is just Augustinianism. Now, there's some points on which they would likely need to have, they would need some correction on some points, and I'm imagining that Dr. Allen may have some points that he may need correction on, although we haven't read it yet, so it's too early to say on that particular point. The fact that he's citing a scholar whose work's been heavily debunked on Augustine does not bode well, but let's reserve our final judgment on that point. I see Kevin's biblical discussions here, and he loves Dr. David Allen. So that's great. And Kevin and I, God willing, will be debating next month on compatibilism. Should be an interesting debate. Good to see you here, Kevin. And I have some interesting questions for you, Kevin. I'm not sure the best way to reach out, probably through Facebook Messenger. So I'll try to reach out that way. Some questions related to the debate. They're not pressing or urgent or anything like that. So coming back now to this particular book, Liberating Romans from Reformed Captivity, a critical evaluation of Calvinism's interpretation of Paul's letter. Right off the bat, one of my concerns about this title is that, of course, Calvinism, and by that he means the 5 points, Calvinism doesn't necessarily have just one uniform interpretation of all of Scripture or any of Scripture. Now, of course, there are some general points, the so-called 5 points, which if someone agrees on those points, then somehow they think that Scripture teaches those points, and that might and that almost always involves Romans as one of the parts of Scripture that people appeal to when it comes to the question of Calvinism and Scripture. Romans is one of those go-to places. But regardless, it's not as though there's like a Reformed confession that says, here's how you must interpret Romans. So how would one go about this? Well, one way to go about it would be to go to, if you're going to say Calvinism's interpretation, it seems like it would be better or more scholastic, perhaps, to go and say liberating from Calvin's interpretation. But then again, I don't know if that's really the issue. In other words, I'm not sure the issue is we should be picking apart John Calvin's interpretation of the book of Romans. He did write a commentary on Romans, and let's check. I mean, Calvin would seem to be the most likely person to be cited on this. And indeed, there are a number of citations of John Calvin. The citations are almost a page and a half of items. And let's see what's cited. So, Articles of Predestination from volume 9 of his works, calumny, a vague calumny against the doctrines of John Calvin of the hidden providence of God. Another theological treatise, a treatise on the eternal predestination of God, in a brief introduction aiming all the good faithful against the errors of the common sect of the Anabaptists. Sermons on Deuteronomy, sermons on Ephesians, the Gospel according to St. John, the epistles of Paul the Apostle to the Romans and the Thessalonians. That would seem to be the one you'd expect to be the go-to book for this particular analysis. Unfortunately, this bibliography, while it does seem to presumably comprehend all of the citations, it doesn't identify on which page the citations are provided. So you can't quickly check to see where the Romans commentary has been cited or how much it's been cited or anything like that. Just a list of the bibliography. It's a little unfortunate that there's no such index of citations, but that it is what it is. So then he also has his sermons on Psalm 119, the epistles of Paul the Apostle to the Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians, first epistle of Paul the Apostle to the Corinthians, sermons on Melchizedek and Abraham, the Institutes of the Christian Religion, the French edition, and the Institutes of the Christian Religion, and sermons on Timothy. So those are the citations from Calvin, so a wide variety, and including his Romans commentary. But the question is, okay, so aside from Calvin himself, what other notable Calvinist exegetes, what other Reformed commentaries are the target of, since this isn't, a critical evaluation of Calvin's interpretation, but Calvinism's, one might expect some other Reformed commentaries on the Scripture. Now, one thing I did, and I can share my screen here. I believe I can. I used to be able to. They keep changing how they do things here. Give me one moment. Here it is. Share screen. We'll try this way. This should do the trick. So this is an article by Keith Matheson, who's a Reformed scholar. And it's a 3-minute read for those who are interested in that sort of thing. And what it is it's like a top 5 list of commentaries. He points out that Sproul wrote an outstanding expositional commentary on Romans. And in addition, here are the 5 most helpful. So let's see if Sproul if Sproul made it into the list. So Sproul's Chosen by God, Sproul's The Mystery of the Holy Spirit, and Sproul's What is Reformation Theology were cited, but not his expositional commentary on Romans, unless it happens that it's named Chosen by God or The Mystery of the Holy Spirit. So I don't think that that's the case. So unfortunately, he's already missed one of these here. Douglas Moo, the Epistle of the Romans, the Epistle to the Romans. Let's see. Moo is a well-known. Moo doesn't. Oh, there it is. Okay, Moo did make the list. So Douglas Moo, the Epistle to the Romans, it's mentioned somewhere. again, we don't, the emphasis here, it's hard to see, but at least he did make the citation. How about Frank Thielman, Romans? Let's check it out. Frank Thielman. Yep. Frank Thielman, Romans is on the list. So far, so good. Thomas Schreiner, Romans. Should be there somewhere, hopefully. Let's check it out. Thomas Schreiner, Romans is on the list. Bibliography. How about Richard Longenecker, Epistle to the Romans? Checking it out. It's there. The Epistle to the Romans, Longenecker. Colin Cruz, Paul, that should be there then as well. And indeed it is. So aside from Sproul's own expositional commentary on the Romans, the other top 5 identified by Keith Matheson are there. Now there's another site. This one, let me change the ratio here a little bit. It's not. There we go. So this one is a little bit of a more advanced website for, this is the reformedbooksonline.com. And it's a great resource for finding Reformed commentaries on things. And here we have commentaries on Romans. Now, not all of these are necessarily Reformed. You see there's John Calvin's commentaries, John Brown of Wamfre's commentaries. There's the intermediate level commentaries, including Charles Hodge's commentary. I would be surprised if he didn't include Hodge, but let's just check whether Hodge's commentary made it in here. Charles Hodge, commentary on Romans, it made the list. William Plumer, that would be an interesting choice. See if he made the list of the bibliography here. Plumer did not. Thomas Robinson, let's see, 1900s, John Murray. Yeah, that's one of the big ones. Let's see if John Murray has made the list. John Murray, Redemption Accomplished and Applied, but not John Murray's The Epistle to the Romans. So that was, unfortunately, there's a miss for our friends. And then the advanced ones include Shedd's commentary and Charles Vaughan's commentary, both from the 19th century. Let's see if Shedd made the list. I would think so. If Hodge made the list, Shedd should make the list, but let's see. Sure, the dogmatic theology, yes, but the critical and doctrinal commentary on Romans did not. And let's see, Charles Vaughan. Charles Vaughan did not make the list. We talked about John Calvin. What about Martin Luther's commentary on Romans? Now, he's not typically, he's Lutheran versus Reformed, but it's a Reformation commentary. How does it line up on this particular list? Martin Luther, his commentary to the Galatians is cited, his preface to Romans, his prefaces to the New Testament, his table talk, but oddly enough, not his commentary on Romans. For whatever reason, that one didn't make it into the citation list here. Let's see what else. We've got Peter Martyr Vermilye. That one is a little obscure, good but obscure. I wonder if he made it onto the list. Vermilye. On Original Sin by Vermilye did, but not the treatise on Romans. And I'm starting to see a theme that some of the people who are key authors are cited, but not necessarily their work on Romans. But no, at least a good sampling of the notables was there. When we start digging in these, I'm not. Let's see, John Brown of Wamfre. We can check. I wouldn't expect it to be here. But, and indeed I'm correct, it is not here. There's some more popular level. Let's see, where's the Intermediate, David Brown. I believe that's also not available, not cited. Thomas Chalmers, we could check that. Thomas Chalmers, lecture on Romans. There's a citation to, not to the whole thing, but specifically to lecture 62 on Romans 8, 31 to 32 in Lectures on the Epistle of the Romans. So there's a pinpoint site to part of it. But he does reference it. So there's that. And Eubank, let's check that. Not seeing it right away, but that's because Essler is at the end of one page and Fairbairn is on the next page. So no. Forbes. Nope. Ford. Nope. Fry. Nope. John Godwin. Nope. HCG Mule. I'm gonna say probably not. And nope. Who else? Philip Schaff. I would hope that he's going to go with that one, but let's see. No, unfortunately not. John Stephen or W. Walford. Neither Stephen nor Walford. Waldron, but not Walford. What about Lenski's interpretation of Romans? Now that's Lutheran, of course. It's not strictly speaking Reformed, so it's less critical. It didn't make the list. What about Hamilton? Robert Hamilton, but not Floyd. Eugene Hamilton? Nope. F.F. Bruce. That's a big one. Did that make the list? Surely that made the list. F.F. Bruce. No, it did not. Ali Bonner's The Myth of Pelagianism did, but not F.F. Bruce. Massive commentary on the Epistle of Romans. And then there's the advanced level. We could look through these for some notables, but I think we'll stop there. I mean, we've gone through. We've kind of seen what we've seen, which is to say that it's not in terms of. And now, of course, we haven't looked to see how he has cited these, how frequently, how extensively, how thoroughly he evaluates the points as he's going through. But at least out of Matheson's top 5, he has citations to all 5. He doesn't do quite as well when it comes to a more comprehensive panel of Reformed commentaries, but at least like I said, at least the 5 Matheson's top 5, he has some kind of citation there. So we have that. Algo says hello to Church and Fan and Kevin, and Algo mentioned Tony. Tony is credited in the acknowledgments. There's a credit there that he's a former student and friend of many years and the most meticulously thorough editor I've ever worked with. I don't know what the original said before it was edited. I'm just joking around. Presumably he didn't edit his own acknowledgement. But in any event, my appreciation to Tony for using footnotes rather than endnotes. Much appreciate that. I wish that he had a citations index so that you could works cited index or something like that, so you could see where these various works are cited. I can give you some sense though by let's just peeking at the. Well, we wouldn't expect too much. Now, remember our chapter outline that we that we went through was the recipients and purpose is chapter 1. The theological influence of Augustine is chapter 2. And then we turn to total depravity as chapter 3. Oh, and Frenny Cosmic has arrived, and so has Michelle Sherry, KJV. Good to see you here. Great to see you all here. I'm glad you could be here. Sorry that Dan's not here to greet you as well, but God willing, he'll be back next week. He's just unfortunately not able to be here this week. So the total depravity. Let's take a look at the total depravity chapter and see how much of Reformed interpretation is interacted with in this chapter. And it's not randomly selected. I've tried to bypass two chapters where we wouldn't necessarily expect to have any Reformed theology interaction. But since it's called Augustine, Reformed Theology, and Total Depravity, we'd expect to see cited some works by Augustine, some Reformed theologians, and Total Depravity, and presumably some kind of commentary on Romans at some point here. There is a footnote, a significantly long footnote, actually, on page 41, and this footnote is about the issue of creationism versus traditionism, not creationism as opposed to evolution, but the question of whether the soul was created or passed down from parent to child. And so there's a footnote about that, which of course, does that relate to total depravity? I guess it does to some extent, but perhaps we'll come back to that. I don't imagine that we're going to see a lot of question or evidence of Reformed theologians basing their theology on one or the other view, but perhaps it is. So the emphasis at the beginning is Augustine. So that there's more discussion of Augustine on page 42 with some citations to Gerald Bonner, some citation to Augustine's own work, some citation to Paula Fredrickson, and some discussion of original sin by Blocher. And he says that Blocher's approach is one that all non-Calvinists can affirm, which surely isn't true, considering how many kinds of non-Calvinists there are. But presumably what he's saying is that he himself can affirm it. The second resource is Tom McCall's view, but Tom McCall is not a Calvinist, but he affirms original sin. So again, more discussion of Augustine, a citation to the simply terrible work by Dr. Wilson, a citation of J.N.D. Kelly, another citation of Augustine, another citation of Wilson, a citation of Burns, but so far nothing specifically. The only Reformed theologians so far in this chapter are we're up to page 44. We started at page 41. No interaction yet with Reformed theology as such, except to say that there's one Calvinist called Henry Blocher who has a concept of original sin that anybody can agree with. Now continue on. Page 44, another citation of Wilson, another citation of Burns, another citation of Wilson. It's just terrible. And then there's a citation of Harwood, a citation of Wilson again, and Burns yet again. Burns is From Persuasion to Predestination. Let's just double check what's this work by Burns to see. J. Patout Burns has the development of Augustine's doctrine of operative grace, theological. So he's not specifically. He's just being cited as an Augustinian scholar. That's the reason for citing Burns. Let's continue on. Whenever I hear Burns, I think release the hounds, but that's the wrong Burns. Algo asks if Ken Wilson's mentioned. That's the Wilson I keep talking about, Algo. You maybe not caught up yet with this, but yeah. Another citation of Wilson, a citation of Wiggers, which is discussing historical presentation of Augustinianism and Pelagianism from the original sources. There's a footnote that's not a citation, where he just offers a comment. And he says that this is his comment, by the way. It is interesting to note that Paul places human corruption not in the soul, but in the body. In me, that is, in my body, dwells no good thing, Romans 7:18. So that's his own, it's his own part. Then he adds a caveat to something by Crisp. And who's Crisp? Yeah, Oliver Crisp. So Oliver, he says, most non-Calvinists would affirm, including this author, meaning including David Allen, would affirm Oliver Crisp's description of original sin. I don't know. Again, I'm not sure whether this is really most or not, but in any event, that's the citation. So he has a citation from Oliver Crisp on original sin, and that's, so far he's not doing much to liberate Romans from Reformed theology. The only Reformed people he cited so far have said that have been citations he's been in agreement with, and the rest have been mostly Augustinian related. Then he goes to Thomas McCall, cites Against God and Nature, 2 citations of McCall. Then Daniel Kilpatrick, and Daniel Kilpatrick may be finally an attempt to interact with Reformed theology, but he's not a commentator. Daniel Kilpatrick, then Pinson, 40 Questions about Arminianism. McCall, Against God and Nature again. Thomas Oden, The Transforming Power of Grace. But Thomas Oden is a great Methodist Arminian, according to Allen. So not a Reformed theologian. A citation of Augustine, another citation of Burns, a citation of Norman Williams, The Ideas of the Fall and Original Sin. And then a citation of O'Connell, The Origin of the Soul in St. Augustine's later works. Then a citation of Ken Wilson's appendix. And then a citation of Augustine, another citation of Augustine, another citation of Augustine. We're up to page 49. Page 50, a citation of Augustine, a citation of Augustine, another citation of Augustine, a citation of Burns, a citation of Rist talking about Augustine, citation of Burns, a discussion of Augustine's theology, citing Donato Ogliari's The Relationship Between Grace and Free Will in the Discussion of Augustine with the So-Called Semi-Pelagians. And he says, this is the best and most scholarly, exhaustive account I'm aware of concerning Augustine's theology and the Massilian monks, most notably John Cassian. I suppose my friend Dr. J, as I used to go by, will maybe a little hurt that his work is not being consulted here, but who knows. O'Connell, An Origin of the Soul in Augustine's later works, another citation of the notorious Dr. Wilson, a citation of Mick Gifford on the West from Tertullian to Erasmus, another citation of Wilson, another citation of Wiggers, another citation of Wiggers, a citation of Fredrickson, Augustine and the Jews, another citation of Wilson, including his ridiculous acronym DUPIED, a citation of Martin, a citation of Aaron Sherwood, which is a commentary of some kind on Romans. Now the question is, who is who is Aaron Sherwood? Aaron Sherwood. Let's see if we can quickly identify Sherwood to see if perhaps he is a Reformed exegete. He seems to be on the faculty of Regent. He has a PhD in biblical studies. Very good. If this is the one, I can't quickly tell if he's Calvinist or not. I wonder if this is a good choice, a good chance for AI to give me a hint about the Aaron Sherwood. Is the Aaron Sherwood who wrote a Romans commentary a Calvinist? Let's see. Probably not. And I say probably not because on the Evangelical Arminians site, there says for good Arminian or non-Calvinist commentaries, check out the commentaries by, among other people, Aaron Sherwood. So I think it's fair to say Aaron Sherwood is probably not a Calvinist based on that. So that brings us to page 55, the end of chapter 3, without citing this entire first point of Tulip. There's no citation of any Reformed commentary on Romans in the entire chapter. Now, maybe that's because Alan doesn't so strongly object to total depravity. Perhaps, I don't know. But he doesn't cite even one Reformed commentary in that chapter on the first point. Lots of citations of Doc Wilson, but not so much of any Reformed author. So you would think, if you're going to represent Calvinism's interpretation of Paul's letter, that you would probably cite Calvinists interpreting Paul's letter. But at least this one chapter that we've looked at so far, that hasn't been the result. So let me pause for a moment and see what's going on with the chat. Let's see. There's Michelle mentioned a book by R.C. Sproul, which Algo recommends, called Willing to Believe, The Controversy Over Free Will. Let's see. There's some more discussion of Algo OPC says Dupied is dubious. Yeah. It's an odd attempt to abbreviate. So let's see, what else do we have here? Maybe we're not being fully fair because maybe the citations are somewhere else in another section. Maybe we should dig into the next chapter, just go into the unconditional election, which I know that I'm pretty confident that Alan disagrees with unconditional election. So maybe we should see what kind of citations we get in that chapter. Wow. Well, I just started to just take a look at the first couple of pages. So this is page 56 and 57 in this paperback edition. 56, he starts off with a citation of his own work. But authors are going to do that. That's fine. So then he has a citation of Calvin's treatise on eternal predestination of God. And then on the next page, a citation of Mark Lindsay's God Has Chosen, the Doctrine of Election Through Christian History, a citation of Irenaeus, a citation of Ambrosiaster's commentary, which is interesting. I do think that Ambrosiaster is a commentator that, well worth reading. It is interesting. It is interesting that he cites him. He doesn't cite him as a Reformed theologian. He seems to be implying that there's that it's a non-Calvinistic take there. He then cites Burns, Chrysostom, Pelagius's commentary on Romans is cited. Let's see, how is that? He then goes to Cyril of Alexandria as found in Burns. And some of the citations are like that. They're citations of Burns, Wiggers, Fredrickson, Landes, and a clarifying footnote about one of Augustine's works, apparently following the flawed theories of Wilson. But perhaps not. I don't know. It's hard to tell from the way that it's written. Harwood, Wiggers. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 citations in a row of Wiggers. Then Stump, Augustine on free will. Wilson, Piper, 5 points towards a deeper experience of God's grace. So what does he cite for Piper? At least is that perhaps some exegetical point? No. What he cites it, Piper for is this. He says, John Piper, for example, referred to Romans 8, 28 to 30 as, quote, the most important text of all in relation to the teaching of unconditional election. But he provides none of Piper's arguments about it, just the statement that it's very important. Fine. He's not even citing, of course, his exegesis of the text. A clarifying footnote. Finally, there's a string of citations to Reformed commentators. Footnote 205. So footnote 205 says, see, for example, Douglas Moo, The Epistle to the Romans, page 533. Thomas Schreiner, Romans, pages 449 to 53. Piccarilli, as an Arminian, and then a citation to Piccarilli, and likewise Jack Cottrell. And then 206 is a citation of Moo's commentary to the Romans. And so at least now he's somehow interacting, but let's read the text to see what's the depth of his interaction here. So the first footnote is, well, we can read them. There are 2 consecutive sentences. One is footnote 205. The next is footnote 206. So here's footnote 205, the sentence that corresponds. Romans 8 specifically highlights the divine initiative, accomplishment, and consummation of salvation for all believers. This point is recognized by Arminians and Calvinists alike. That sentence, this point is recognized by Arminians and Calvinists alike, gets that string citation of Douglas Moo, Thomas Schreiner, Piccarilli, and Cottrell. From the perspective of, yet, as Moo correctly cautioned, so it's a favorable citation of Moo, this does not entail any minimizing of the importance of the human response of faith that has received so much attention in chapters 1 through 4. So far, not liberating anything from Reformed explanations or Calvinistic explanations. The first citation is a string citation saying Calvinists and Arminians agree, and the second is a citation saying that what Moo is saying is correct. Diebler's semantic and structural analysis of Romans. I believe that Diebler is not Calvinist. Then there's a citation of Schreiner in his commentary on Romans. And so let's check this one out. This one might have some substance to it. This is 208. Well, here's what he says. For this one, we might need to read the whole paragraph to get the appropriate context. So we'll do this. This is page 61, the final paragraph of that page. In the Greek text of Romans 8, the 5th paragraph, 8:28 to 30, semantically provides the 5th justification for the claims / conclusion in 8:31 to 39. Romans 8:31 to 39 is divided into 2 paragraphs, 8:31 to 34, 8:35 to 39. Each paragraph functions to make a claim that is based on Romans 8:1 to 30. Paul continues to develop the implications of what has preceded in the way he introduces verse 31. What then shall we say to these things? This is more than a rhetorical question. These things, tauta, can be taken either to refer to 5:1 to 8:30 or to 1:16 to 8:30. And that's where the citation of Schreiner is. Schreiner says, as Schreiner said, Paul reflects back on 5:1 to 8:30 and considers the greatness of what God has accomplished on behalf of believers. And then he goes on to say Schreiner takes the tauta to refer to all that Paul has said in Romans 1:16 to 8:30. Schreiner, Romans 4:49 to 50. So he's citing Schreiner, but just to agree with what Schreiner's saying. Next page has a citation of Iron's Syntax Guide for Readers of the Greek New Testament. And then footnote 210 is a citation of Mu. And then there's a citation of Escola. And I can't tell, that's Theodicy and Predestination in Pauline Soteriology. Then another citation of Schreiner. So we're on a good Schreiner roll here. So let's check about first the Mu citation, which is Mu and Schreiner. Mu, Romans 5:31. See also Schreiner, Romans 4:43. So that's footnote 210. Let's check it out. Let's see. He says the realization of God's purpose in individual believers is the bedrock of the hope of glory. That's what he footnotes. He doesn't seem to be opposing what he's citing Mu or Schreiner for. Instead, he seems to be citing Mu or Schreiner favorably. How about footnote 212? According to Schreiner, all things are vouchsafed to believers, sun auto, with him. Again, he doesn't seem to be interacting in any critical way with what Schreiner has to say. How about footnote 213? There is an eschatological cast to this entire section. Nope. He seems to be agreeing with Schreiner. Then he cites Judith M. Gundry Wolf, Paul and Perseverance. I don't know whether this is supposed to be a Reformed commentator or not. Perhaps it is. 214 seems to be favorably cited. 215. Let's see. 215. Favorable citation. 216. Seems to be a favorable citation. Sherwood, we already talked about that. He cited footnote 218. He says, this is another example of Calvinists' commitment to definitional divine simplicity. Yeah, well, Calvinists are classical theologians. That is, we do hold to divine simplicity. But it's interesting that Allen seems to be open to rejecting divine simplicity based on this, unless he's just agreeing. But here there's at least, although he's not footnoting any specific Calvinist, here he says this. He says Calvinist interpretations that equate foreknow with foreordain lack linguistic support. And then then his footnote is just his own claim about Calvinists' commitment to definitional divine simplicity. And then his statement about that is to foreknow is to foreordain. Foreknowing is predestining. But he doesn't cite any Calvinists saying that. That's just his word. Then he cites Forster and Marston. Meyer. Let's see, Meyer, is that a Calvinist author? Let's check it out. 220, sorry, footnote 220. H.A. Meyer similarly concluded that prognosko never in the New Testament means anything else than to know beforehand. But he seems to be favorably citing him, whoever he is. And Forster and Marston similarly. He talks about Mu and Porter, and he seems to be favorably citing them as well. He says Porter is correct. And Mu notes various occurrences and so forth. So so far we're on page 64. We've had some citation of some reformed commentaries, but no critical evaluation of them, at least no negative critical evaluation of them. Piccarilli. 4 more Piccarilli. This section seems to be based on Piccarilli. This is excursus on foreknowledge. And then there's a footnote that says, in Calvinistic theology, divine foreknowledge is dependent upon divine foreordination. In biblical usage, divine foreknowledge is shaped by the future event. God thus foreknows all that the whole universe of free agents will do without any contradictions to their free agency. I don't know if that's a typo or not, but it presumably, with the excellent editing of his editor, that's not a footnote. So without any contradictions, plural. Normally we would just say without any contradiction. But anyway, so there's a citation here about in Calvinistic theology, but without any identification of which Calvinistic theology is being addressed. However, interestingly, although he doesn't cite Edwards' book on the will here on page 67, perhaps he does. Nope. He doesn't cite it, but he does cite Daniel Whedon, who is critiquing Edwards' book on the will. And he talks about what he calls Edwardsian fallacies, but again, without citing Edwards. So he cites Whedon's freedom on the will, 2 more citations of Sherwood. Then there's a statements made by the British delegation at the Synod of Dort. So that's sort of a Calvinistic citation. And for that, let's see, 237. What Calvinists often mean, for example, John Davenant and others among the British delegation at Dort. So let's see. So for this, he has some kind of citation. Is that election to faith is unconditional or absolute? Salvation itself, it's hard to know where this, salvation itself, let's see, the citation. The citation says, see, for example, the statements by the British delegation. And then the quotation is this: some promises of God are touching the end, others touching the means, which conduce to the end. The promises concerning the end, that is to say, salvation, are conditional, but for as much as no man is able to perform the conditions, God has also made most free and absolute promises to give the very conditions which he works in us, that so by them, as by means, we may attain the end. And salvation itself, Allen goes on to say, salvation itself, or predestination to salvation and glorification, is conditional upon the instrumentality of faith, as all Calvinists affirm. And he goes on to say, for Calvinists, the foreknowledge and predestination of Romans 8:29 is an act by which God unconditionally chooses some people to be the sole recipients of his saving mercy and grace. No citation. He does go on to cite Moo at 240, but when he does, he says Moo correctly noted that Paul's use of conformed in verse 29 picks up the with Christ dimension of Christian experience that is to be found in 8:17b. There's more discussion of Moo, footnotes 243, 244, and Holtgren's commentary on Romans, and Fitzmyer. Oh my goodness, Joseph Fitzmyer, his commentary on Romans. Let's see, 241. What's this? Joseph Fitzmyer. Isn't Joseph Fitzmyer Roman Catholic? Am I mistaken? In any event, he does have a citation to him. All right. Let's check out the citations of Moo. 243, 244. 243. It seems to be. He says, notice again how both Moo and Scheiner interpret the passage as applying to believers. He seems to be citing that favorably. Again, we seem to be seeing, Algo says Fitzmyer is absolutely Roman Catholic. Yeah, then there's a citation of Calvin's Institutes, Jerry Walls, and Joseph Donegal's Why I'm Not a Calvinist. Braxton Hunter, oh my goodness, is cited. Moo is cited again 2 more times, 249, 250. And what is it? So he says Moo correctly cautions, and then a citation. And then finally, again, he quotes from Moo, seemingly in agreement with Moo. He says, without citing anybody, he says some Calvinists suggest that regeneration is implied in this effectual sense of calling, and that sanctification is implied in conformed to the image of his Son and in glorified. But no citation of which Calvinists that might be. Origen is cited. Sherwood is cited. Escala is cited multiple times, twice. Lennox is cited. Determined to believe, John Lennox. The sovereignty of God, 256. John Lennox rightly explains, though, Sherwood, Escala, Clement of Alexandria, Forster and Marston, Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Whiston's translation, which our friends over at Apocrypha Apocalypse criticized, and not without some justification. But there's a better translation available now. I would suggest using that one if you can. Certainly there's a better 19th century translation as well, which is almost as good as the new one. I'll leave that to the side, but it's an interesting take on Josephus. Herbert Danby, some discussion of the Mishnah. Thornhill's The Chosen People, a citation to Allen and Lemke with a GeoCities URL. I didn't even know that was still around. Okay. It says, don't miss his critique of reformed notion of God's decreed and revealed will and his excellent exegesis of the meaning of the vessels of wrath and vessels of glory. That's so interesting. But nothing. Davies, Jewish and Pauline Studies, Eisenbaum, Paul was not a Christian. That's cited. What in the world is he citing that for? He says this, he cites this, as has been noted, Luther may have seen Romans as the answer to the question, how can I be saved? But that is not Paul's question. Paul's question is, now that the end of time is at hand, how will God reconcile all people, Jews and Gentiles, collectively? For that, he cites Eisenbaum, Paul was not a Christian. Wow. Okay. Then Ali Bonner, Stephen Williams, again Williams, The Election of Grace, citation of Klein, Williams, correctly noted by N.T. Wright. I don't know if he considers Wright Calvinist or not. I hope not. Brian Abasciano, not Calvinist. Ken Wilson's, he calls it a trenchant critique of Augustine. Oh my. That just terrible. And more on Harwood, two citations of Harwood, David Capes, Rodney Reeves, Randall Richards, Rediscovering Paul. Eric Hankins, Beyond Calvinism and Arminianism Toward a Baptist Soteriology. Hankins again. Christopher J.H. Wright. William Lane Craig, not typically thought of as a Calvinist theologian. Beeke, Debated Issues in Sovereign Predestination. Well, Beeke is a Reformed person, and there's some discussion of these issues. There's like 2 more citations of Beeke. So let's check out these Beeke citations. This is 282 through 284. John Calvin's teaching on the reprobate reflects his unwavering belief that the ultimate cause of the reprobation is the sovereign will of God. As Joel Beeke has observed, God's sovereign choice in election, or conversely his rejection and reprobation, can never be ultimately attributed to any human action. Calvin insisted that the doctrine of double predestination should be openly and fully, quotation marks, proclaimed. And that for that citation, he goes to a part of Calvin's Institutes. He has another citation of Calvin's Institutes as well. And then Ken Keithley, who seems to have a Molinist approach. Dr. Wilson again, Brian Baskiano, Yaroslav Pelikan, Herman Bavinck. There's a nice Reformed theologian, at least, 291. Even among proponents of an immutable decree of reprobation, such as Herman Bavinck, there is an occasional acknowledgement that this doctrine finds only rare and indirect support, if ever explicit, in the New Testament. So a favorable citation of Bavinck for that. And let's see. Finally, we come to, at page 87, we come to, how much, we have, well, there's a good chunk more on this unconditional election section of the book, I guess. Or did I, no, there's a good chunk more. So, but finally, we come to some interaction with a Reformed commentary on Romans, I hope. He says, let us consider John Calvin and his articulation of the doctrine of election and predestination. Calvin's dependence on Augustine for his conception of these doctrines is well established. His commentary on Romans, written in 1539 during his time in Strasbourg, offers significant insight into his theological priorities and exegetical method. The dedication to Simon Grynaeus and Calvin's introductory essay to the epistle provide a clear window into his hermeneutical aims. For Calvin, the central message of Romans is the doctrine of justification by faith. He declared, if we understand this epistle, we have a passage opened to us to the understanding of the whole of Scripture. For Calvin, Romans was not merely one letter among many, but the key to unlocking the message of the entire Bible. A selection of 4 quotations from Calvin demonstrates both his teaching on unconditional election and predestination and his reliance on Augustinian theology. And those are then the three. However, the first 3 quotations that are provided are quotations from Calvin's Institutes, from 294, footnote 294, footnote 295, footnote 296 are all Calvin's Institutes. How about the 4th quotation? Oh, you're going to be surprised. It's Calvin's Institutes. So he doesn't interact then with Calvin's commentary on Romans yet, but he just mentions that he has one. There's some more quotations from Beeke on Calvin on similarities and differences of election and reprobation. 3 citations like that. Then one from Diebler or Diebler. I'm not sure how the EI is pronounced there. Cranfield is cited as well. That's a favorable citation. I don't know whether he's a Calvinist or not. So we're up to page 89 and still no. Oh, okay, hold on. He does say John Piper is representative of modern standard Calvinistic interpretation of Romans 9. And he cites John Piper's The Justification of God, an exegetical and theological study of Romans 9, 1 through 23. No specific page cited here, but just a high-level citation there. And now he continues to say this. He says, as has often been noted with respect to Piper's interpretation, he failed to continue Paul's argument beyond 9:23. Well, his book is called 9:1 to Theological Study of 9:1 to 23. For his argument to work, Piper cannot include 9:24 to 29 or chapters 10 and 11 for that matter. Romans 9:24 to 29 introduces the purpose in writing Romans and is contradictory to Piper's efforts to extract double predestination to salvation and reprobation. Following Luther, Piper misconstrued Paul's reference to works in 9:11:18 as referring to all human works in general and not the works of the Mosaic Law as Paul is addressing. This is a fundamental error that caused Piper to fail to employ the argument concerning faith and works that Paul himself develops in 9:30 to 10:13. And for that, he cites Surely, a critique of John Piper's justification of God, which he also cited for the Piper, this other claim that Piper is somehow contradicting. So there's no actual interaction with Piper himself, just citation of a secondary source critical of Piper. There's sort of vaguely interacting with Piper's comment. Let's see what else we have. Lennox determined to believe. Fitzmyer, again, Fitzmyer. Is it favorable? Is it at least unfavorable? Fitzmyer rightly observed. Oh my. Yeah. No hesitation to adopt what Fitzmyer says. Looking ahead, I'm not even going to continue reading. I'm just going to skim forward looking for, well, let me check how much farther I have to go to get to the end of this particular chapter on unconditional election before I decide if it's worthy to keep going. Let's wow, it's like 25 more pages. Well, let's forge ahead. Hamilton, election in Romans chapter 9, 312. Footnote 312. Is it favorable or unfavorable? I'm having trouble locating 312. I'm sure it's there. I found 311. Oh, there's 312. Favorable quotation in any event. Jonathan Williams, The Edomite Enigma. Bunch of citations of that. Williams. Spina. More Williams. Lots of Williams. Escala. Brendan Byrne. S.J. another Jesuit. Let's see. 327. Is it favorable? Nope. I mean, it's not unfavorable. It is favorable. Brendan Byrne summed up the proper conclusion. So yeah, the Brendan Byrne, S.J., that's Society of Jesus. So he's a Jesuit author. N.T. Wright, Gerhard, Lang, Middle Knowledge, Whiteley, The Theology of St. Paul, Strauss and Wagner, Forrest and Marston, Lennox, Thornhill, Stowers, a rereading of Romans, Abasciano, Richard Hayes. I don't remember if Hayes is anyhow Calvinistic. Doesn't ring a bell. 344. Anyway, it's favorable if he is. Lennox, Augustine, Wetzel, Deibler, Hayes, Chrysostom, Forrest and Marston, Abasciano, N.T. Wright, Lennox, Abasciano, Walls and Donegall, Why I'm Not a Calvinist. That's what he said. Oh, he has a citation of Leighton Flowers, The Potter's Promise. There, and Leighton Flowers, God's Provision for All. And a citation of Ronnie Rogers. And another citation of Ronnie Rogers. And he says, both men are former Calvinists who have thought deeply about the subject at hand. N.T. Wright, Matthew Bates, Strauss and Wagner, Deibler, Escala, Hamilton, Escala, Shirley, Escala. Let's check the Hamilton if that's it's called election. And no, I think we saw before he's not. 366. Anyway, it's a favorable citation. Keck, Hankins, Thornhill, Escala, Wiggers, Sherwood, McKnight, Bates, Lennox, Hart, David Bentley Hart. I'm trying to remember who's David Bentley Hart. Traditio Deformis in First Things. And then he adds this. Oh, he didn't caveat Fitzmyer's Roman Catholicism, but he doesn't. He does say this: we, of course, do not affirm Hart's drift into universalism as articulated in his "that all shall be saved," but he does presumably endorse the other things: the heart, the 5 citations in a row of Hart to end chapter 4 at page 123, 122, and 123. All 5 citations are to Hart, Traditio Deformis, and so when Hart attacks Calvinism, he's that part they can endorse, but not his universalism. Okay, well, wonderful. All right, so I think what we've seen is there's almost no interaction with Reformed theological it says a critical evaluation of Calvinism's interpretation of Paul's letter. But as to at least the first 2 points, and looking at the citations, assuming that citations are thorough and proper, because he insists that they are up front in his acknowledgments. So we'll just take that for what it is. And there is no meaningful, critical evaluation of Calvinism's interpretation there. There isn't there. There's some arguments made against Calvinism, but as far as a critical evaluation of Calvinism's interpretation, you would expect that you'd have to cite at least some Calvinist interpretation. The closest we got was a very general statement about what Piper holds, and then citations of critics of Piper, but without getting into the actual exegesis offered by Piper. So we went into the maximum depth that he offered for any Reformed theologian, which was John Piper, who he's a great pastor, and he's been a blessing to the church. I have no doubt about that. There's certain points where he and I part ways, of course, but I have a lot of appreciation for Piper. He's not one of the leading commentators. When I think of top Reformed commentaries, some of the ones that are cited by Dr. Allen are leading Reformed authors, but when he cites those leading ones, he ends up yes, exactly. Yeah, I do point that out when I cite him. So that's from the Thoughts of Francis Turton. It's hard to post URLs, so the URL may not come through if you try to post. But anyway, the bottom line is this: we have not seen a lot of good interaction so far. Just looking at the high level analysis, looking at the books cited, we saw some positive signs that it looks like he's identified in his bibliography a number of significant Reformed commentaries. But in terms of actually interacting with the Reformed arguments, it's not there. We have some small interaction with Piper, and that's about it from that chapter. And the previous chapter, almost no interaction at all. Now, there is favorable interaction with a number of selected Reformed authors, especially Moo and Schreiner. But what it seems to be, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but it seems to be that Allen's approach is to cite Calvinists when he thinks that the Calvinists are agreeing with him, and not to cite the Calvinists on points where he doesn't agree with the Calvinists. But that means, as a result, he can't deliver on this promise of a critical evaluation of Calvinism's interpretation, because he's not going to cite the Calvinist interpretations in order to provide the critical evaluation. It's like the fundamental point. If I'm going to provide a critical analysis of David Allen's book, I have to kind of quote from David Allen's book and address the points that I find wrong or disturbing about it. But anyway, I've been babbling on for about an hour and a quarter. Unfortunately, my friend Dan is not here. This would normally take less of a toll on my voice if it's not just me babbling on. But I've been going on. People have been patient with me about just hearing my voice. But let me just go through and check out some of the other Well, let me go through and do this. I will, first of all, sort of thank everyone as I see them in the chat for being here and for participating. And I'll try to answer any chat questions that I can readily analyze and respond to. So now, if you've been sitting by patiently waiting to ask a question, now's your chance. Please do. When I get to the bottom of of everyone who's been here asking questions, I'll try to answer your question, especially if I see it there at the bottom. But anyway, Kevin, I mentioned before, he loves Dr. David Allen. So I mean, I think we can love Dr. Allen without necessarily agreeing with everything he says. So that's wonderful. Kevin's Biblical Discussions. I'm glad you're here. Algo OPC. I'm also glad you're here. Same for Michelle Cherie, KJV, and Frenny Cosmic. And let's see, lots of interaction amongst that group. And I'm scrolling down. I know there's more people. David Mark, good to see you here. I don't remember seeing you here earlier, but I apologize if I should have seen you. He says hello to all. So hello to David. And apparently, he has some interesting news about Peter Van Maastricht. Their volume 5 is now available for pre-order. That's awesome. I'm really looking forward. I thought it would be fun to go through that sometime here on this in this video, but I'm sort of torn on that. I don't want people to feel like they can replace getting the book with seeing capsules of it. But at the same time, if I don't publicize it more, I wonder if people will get the influence. And Van Maastricht is a significant author in Reformed theology. Interesting. Algo says, in his commentary on Romans, Fitzmyer points out that Luther was not the first to invoke sola fide in his translation of Romans. Others use the term in a broader context as well. Interesting. He says, Piper preached through Romans for 7 years. Wow. So maybe I'm underestimating the significance of Piper. Maybe Piper's a great representative. But I'll tell you this, those 7 years of sermons, not cited, not cited in this book. And certainly no argument that is set forth by Piper is presented here in such a form as like a quotation from Piper of some argument of Piper, and then that is evaluated critically. There's some general dismissal of Piper based on a citation of someone else's work. Now, that someone else may indeed have gone through Piper's comments, and maybe that other person's work is worth reading. But so far, if you're looking for a critical evaluation of Calvinism's interpretation of Paul's letter, I can't say that you would have found it. And we're about halfway through the book. We're 2/5 of the way through the points. We're about halfway through the pages of the book. It's not looking good for this particular book. But we'll continue on. God willing, we'll try to do another episode on this at some point. Let's see. Good to see you, Frenny Cosmic. I don't think I mentioned before, but good to see you here. Interesting. Lots of interesting comments. Somebody says, I like your voice. I appreciate that, Algo. I've been told it's soporific, so just don't listen while you're driving and you'll be safe. But if you're driving or operating other heavy machinery, please be careful. All right, well, I appreciate everyone who stopped by, and I think that it's been, hopefully, it's been an interesting experience for me just going through this initial look at liberating Romans from Reformed captivity. I thought about characterizing this as liberation theology. But those of you who know what liberation theology actually is realize that would be a horrible, horrible insult to Dr. Allen. And I definitely don't want to do that, even just to be humorous. I think that's probably taking it too far. But I was tempted. Now, the fact that he's citing Jesuits is not going to help his cause at all. But he's not a liberation theologian, so I'm not going to go there. Let's see. Read it so we don't have to. Well, I'm reading some of it to you, so there's that. If there is key stuff, and if there are good arguments, by the way, I mean, I don't mean to be too dismissive. I think it's ridiculous that he relies so heavily on the debunked work of Dr. Wilson. But even setting that issue aside, if he has good arguments, I would love to hear them. If he has actually some reasonable interaction with Reformed interpretations of Paul's letter to the Romans, I would love to hear them. I'd love to interact with them. I'd love to provide a rebuttal to them. Or if not a rebuttal, I'd love to agree with them and have my mind changed by the truth, if that's what Alan's offering. But so far, he hasn't offered us that. So let's see. Paul Day says, why do so many by the way, good to see you here, Paul Day. Why do so many non-Calvinists say they know more about Calvinism than the people who call themselves Calvinists? I don't know. There's an odd trend. I haven't noticed it so much in person, but online, there definitely are people out there they're like, they insist that Calvinists believe X, Y, and Z, and if you say you're a Calvinist but you don't hold to X, Y, and Z, then the thought seems to be, well, you're just lying to cover up your real beliefs. Well, no, that's not the case. You just don't understand something. But yeah, think liberating Romans for us. All right. Yeah. Dave Hunt was on. That was funny that there's I don't know if it's still there on the Dividing Line audio that James White puts before his I forget what he calls it. It's the Radio Free Geneva. And he has some special audio that he plays before the Radio Free Geneva episodes. One of them was he has like I don't know if he still does, two audio quotations from Dave Hunt. One of them was like, they're taken like a few months apart, as I recall. Algo would know better than I do. But one of them was like, James, I'm very ignorant about the reformers, or something like this. Algo will remember the audio. I'm sure he's heard it more time. I've heard it a lot of times, and I'm sure Algo has heard it more than I have. But then a few months later, he says, I think I know more. I forget exactly what his word was. But he's like, I think I know more about more about Reformed theology than most Calvinists, or something like that. I don't have I should get a transcript of the audio, but it was just a few months had difference between saying that he's very ignorant of the Reformers and then saying that he knows more about Reformed theology than most Calvinists. So it was just like, well, I mean, it's possible. I mean, Dave Hunt's a smart guy, or was a smart guy. Maybe he got really spun up and educated on Calvinism in a few months, but it was just kind of like, really, it's kind of strange. Was it 3 weeks before? I don't remember the exact timing. It was yeah, it is strange. David Allen is anyway, I'll just he provides this summary of his credentials on the back cover. He says David Allen serves as the distinguished professor of practical theology and dean of the Adrian Rogers Center for Biblical Preaching at Mid-Atlantic Baptist Theological Seminary in Memphis, and is the founder of Preaching Coach, all one word, but capital C for coach, a ministry to pastors, preachers, and teachers. He holds the PhD, not a PhD. That's so strange. He holds the PhD in humanities with a major in linguistics from the University of Texas at Arlington. He's the author of 8 books, including Hebrews in the NAC, the revision of which is scheduled to be released in 2026 in the Christian Standard Commentary Series, and To the Jew First, 2-part Romans, a structural game changer ? Also, he is a co-editor and contributing author of 6 books, including Calvinism, A Biblical and Theological Critique, which was published by B&H Academic in 2022. This is not published by B&H Academic, but he says there could be only one PhD. He says, it's a claim that gets you a free ticket to join Soteriology 101 these days. Occasionally Soteriology 101 has people on it who are Calvinists to interact with, and good for them. I'm happy to try to interact I will say this: Alan uh, offers this kind of material. I have a question for him if he's willing to debate any reformed debater on this. Doesn't have to be me. I am not a distinguished professor of practical theology and dean, but there are suitably skilled debaters. There are suitably notable reformed theologians who would be willing to step up and debate the Romans with Dr. Allen. And it could be me. I'm willing to throw my virtual hat into the virtual ring, but whether it's me or somebody else, it would be something that would be beneficial if he thinks it can be if something that he can handle. Not everybody's cut out for debate, and it's no slight, in my view, it's no slight to someone if they're unwilling to debate, because not everybody's great at thinking on their feet. I know wise men who would never go into debate because they know they can't think fast on their feet. They can write powerful essays, they can write a written debate response very effectively, but thinking on their feet, there's too much pressure. The public speaking aspect is a pain. There's all these reasons that they're not cut out for a live debate. And if that's the case with Alan, he doesn't want to do debate because of those reasons, fine. But if that's not the issue, and he has in the past when he's described this, he's never said that's the issue, that public speaking makes him nervous, or that that thinking on his feet is not really his thing. He'd prefer to do everything in writing. If that's the case, that he's actually willing to do debates and he just hasn't found a suitable debate opponent, please reach out to people who can help him set that up. Great people include Donnie Badinsky of the Standing for Truth and Marlon Wilson of the Gospel of Truth. Those are just two. There's plenty of other folks out there who moderate debates who would be more than happy to moderate a debate between Dr. Allen and a suitable reformed debater. There are many of us, many who would be willing to handle this issue and who are capable of handling the Word of God and explaining things. I have some people I would recommend as my top picks, but I'll just leave that out at the moment. Let's see. Matt Yester did excellent. There was also David Lewis, this Theology from the Attic, who I think has done some great interactions with Leighton Flowers on Soteriology 101 over the years. And Dan has responded to Leighton Flowers on Soteriology 101 as well. And some just don't fly. Hey, not everybody. Flying is not for everyone either. So, that's fine. And some people have health conditions that make it unreasonable for them to fly or travel, or I get that. There's a Roman Catholic guy who I would love to debate, but he's like in his 80s now, and his health is not ideal. And I just don't. As much as I think he would make a great debate, I just don't think his name. What was the name? The name of the Roman Catholic, Freddy Cosmic? William Marshner, I think, is his name. I don't know. I've been reaching out to people. Reaching out to people to see if they could get me to help him debate. He was born in 1943, so he's 81 years old. I think he would be a great debate opponent if he's up for it, but I think his health issue might prevent it from happening, and also his own personal willingness to do a debate. But he's a sharp guy. He really knows his stuff. I've listened to some of his presentations. I really think he would make for a very enlightening and useful debate, but it just might not happen. So anyway, the other one, conversations from the Attic is the name of the channel. David Lewis, I think, is the name of the person. I don't remember. Anyway, all right. Well, thanks everyone. Apologetics from the Attic. Thank you, Michelle. That's the correct name. I'm terrible with remembering details like that, but thank you for that. And as I said, thanks to everyone who's chimed in throughout the throughout this show. I really appreciate it. And with that, I'm signing off. God be with you.